Immanuel Kant was born in 1724 in the city of Königsberg, a provincial but intellectually active port city in the Kingdom of Prussia. Königsberg lay on the edge of Europe's major intellectual currents, distant from the political centers of Paris and London, yet deeply connected through trade, education, and the circulation of ideas. Kant would spend nearly his entire life in this city, rarely traveling beyond its surroundings. Despite this geographic stillness, his thought would reshape philosophy across Europe and beyond. Kant was raised in a modest household shaped by strict discipline and religious seriousness. His parents belonged to Pietism, a Protestant movement that emphasized moral rigor, personal responsibility, and inner devotion rather than public display. This upbringing left a lasting impression on Kant's character. From an early age, he developed habits of self-control, punctuality, and reflection. These traits would later define his personal life, which became famous for its regularity and restraint. Kant received a demanding education at the Collegium Fridericium, where he studied Latin, theology, logic, and classical texts. The curriculum was rigid and heavily moralized, placing pressure on students to conform intellectually and spiritually. Kant later criticized this education for suppressing curiosity, yet it instilled in him an appreciation for discipline and systematic thinking. In 1740, he entered the University of Königsberg, where he studied philosophy, mathematics, physics, and natural science. At the university, Kant encountered the dominant philosophical tradition of rationalism, particularly the work of Leibniz and Wolff. These thinkers emphasized reason, logic, and metaphysical systems that claimed to describe reality through pure thought. At the same time, Kant studied the emerging natural sciences, including Newtonian physics, which relied on empirical observation and mathematical laws. This tension between rationalism and empiricism would later become central to his philosophical project. Kant's early adulthood was marked by financial difficulty and professional uncertainty. After completing his studies, he worked for many years as a private tutor for wealthy families in the countryside. During this period, he lived modestly and devoted his spare time to reading, writing, and thinking. He published scientific and philosophical essays on topics ranging from cosmology to earthquakes, gradually building a reputation as a serious thinker, though not yet a revolutionary one. In 1755, Kant began teaching at the University of Königsberg as an unsalaried lecturer. He taught a wide range of subjects, including logic, metaphysics, ethics, physics, and geography. His lectures were known for their clarity, organization, and practical examples. Despite his growing intellectual influence, Kant lived a quiet, orderly life. He never married, never held political office, and avoided public controversy. His daily routine became legendary, waking at the same time, walking the same route, eating meals with careful moderation, and dedicating fixed hours to work and rest. For decades, Kant's philosophical work remained within established traditions. He attempted to reconcile rationalist metaphysics with empirical science, but without fundamentally challenging either. This changed dramatically in his late 50s when he experienced what he later described as a profound intellectual awakening. He credited the philosopher David Hume with awakening him from his dogmatic slumber. Hume's skepticism about causation and knowledge forced Kant to confront a troubling question: how is knowledge possible at all? Kant realized that neither pure reason nor raw experience alone could explain human understanding. Rationalism assumed too much certainty, while empiricism risked collapsing knowledge into habit and probability. In response, Kant undertook a radical rethinking of philosophy itself. Rather than asking what the world is like in itself, he asked how the human mind makes experience possible. This shift would transform philosophy at its foundations. In 1781, Kant published his most important work, The Critique of Pure Reason. The book was dense, technical, and difficult, yet its impact was revolutionary. Kant argued that the human mind is not a passive receiver of information, but an active organizer of experience. Space, time, causality, and other fundamental concepts are not derived from the world itself, but from the structure of human cognition. We do not know reality as it is in itself, Kant claimed, but only as it appears to us through the conditions imposed by the mind. This argument overturned centuries of metaphysical assumptions. Kant drew a sharp distinction between phenomena, the world as experienced, and noumena, the world as it exists independently of human perception. While science can achieve genuine knowledge of phenomena, Kant insisted that metaphysical claims about God, the soul, and ultimate reality lie beyond the limits of pure reason. This did not destroy philosophy, but redefined its proper boundaries. Kant's intellectual revolution extended beyond knowledge to morality. In his ethical works, particularly the groundwork of the metaphysics of morals and the critique of practical reason, he rejected moral systems based on emotion, tradition, or consequences. Instead, he argued that morality arises from rational duty. The moral law, according to Kant, is grounded in reason itself and applies universally to all rational beings. Kant formulated this moral law as the categorical imperative. One should act only according to principles that could be willed as universal laws. Moral worth, he argued, does not depend on outcomes or inclinations, but on acting from duty. This view emphasized human autonomy, dignity, and responsibility. Every rational person, Kant believed, is both subject to and author of the moral law, making moral freedom inseparable from rational self-governance. Despite the radical nature of his ideas, Kant's personal life remained unchanged. He continued to live quietly in Königsberg, adhering to his routines and avoiding political activism. Yet his philosophy had profound political implications. He defended freedom of thought, freedom of expression, and the importance of public reason. In his essay on enlightenment, Kant defined it as humanity's emergence from self-imposed immaturity, achieved through the courage to think independently. Kant's later years brought both recognition and tension. His work attracted widespread attention across Europe, inspiring admiration and fierce criticism. At the same time, Prussian authorities grew uneasy with his views on religion. Kant argued that religious belief must be consistent with moral reason, not imposed by authority or dogma. In his 70s, he was formally warned by the state to refrain from writing on religious matters, a command he reluctantly obeyed while maintaining his philosophical position. As Kant aged, his physical health declined, but his intellectual influence continued to grow. Students, scholars, and critics debated his ideas intensely, giving rise to new philosophical movements. German idealism, existentialism, and modern ethics all trace their origins to Kant's work. His rigid life of discipline and restraint stood in striking contrast to the intellectual upheaval he unleashed. Immanuel Kant died in 1804 at the age of 79, having spent nearly his entire life within the boundaries of one city. Yet his ideas transcended borders, languages, and centuries. His philosophy redefined knowledge, morality, and human freedom, establishing limits where certainty had once been assumed and possibilities where skepticism had threatened collapse. Kant is remembered as a thinker whose external life was narrow and controlled, yet whose inner life transformed the course of philosophy. His rigid habits provided the stability from which revolutionary ideas emerged. In confronting the limits of reason, Kant expanded its power, offering a framework in which human dignity, responsibility, and autonomy could be understood without illusion or despair. His legacy endures as a reminder that profound intellectual change does not require dramatic action, but disciplined thought, patience, and the courage to question the foundations of certainty itself.